not too late. I think we'll get underway right now. And so thank you very much, everyone, for making this session. We apologize for the late start, and we would like to go right ahead. I can see that we have a couple of attendees in the room already. Thank you very much for coming this morning, this afternoon, wherever you may find yourself. We're very happy to have you in this session, which is titled Collaborative Biomedical Innovation in Africa to Eliminate Infectious Diseases. It's hosted by the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative, DNDi. Now, as you'd all know, innovation in biomedical research is critical and has been growing quickly across the African continent. Never a time like now has biomedical innovation been so critical to providing solutions by way of drugs, by way of vaccines and diagnostics to address infectious diseases, particularly those that affect the poorest of the poor across the continent of Africa, which we have known as neglected tropical diseases. Over the past 2 decades plus, there has been a lot of collaboration towards these biomedical innovations, collaborations towards funding, collaborations towards the research that would deliver these drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics. And today, we're going to hear from panelists, seasoned panelists who are involved on both sides of the aisle, if I can call it that, from the funding through to the actual conduct of the research and how the funders work among themselves together with researchers, our researchers across the globe, particularly those focused on work in Africa, within Africa, Africa-focused, Africa-led research, how they do this work and the successes we have to date and the vision that we have moving forward into the future to provide solutions. And this morning, I'd like to introduce some of our panelists really quickly. And because of time, I'll have to do this really fast. Dr. Monique Wasuna is the director of the DNDi Africa Regional Office, long-time experience with infectious diseases, particularly neglected tropical diseases, trained as a medical doctor. And Dr. Hayato Urabe is the Senior Director of Investment Strategy and Management at the GIT Fund. Again, a funder that focuses on a number of infectious diseases, including the neglected tropical diseases, and has provided significant funding, GHIT, to work across the African continent. He'll be speaking to us on some of their strategies and the work that they're doing. Dr. Janet Buryanga is a medical doctor who currently works with the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, as a senior program officer in public health, and she's responsible for coordinating and facilitating the development and implementation of policies on health and medical products. And Dr. Alfred Mubangizi is an assistant commissioner for health services, vector-borne and NTDs at the Ministry of Health in Uganda. But I will hold on for now because I'll be introducing him properly very shortly. And finally, I'd like to introduce Dr. Matthew Joroge, who is a scientist at the H3D, the Drug Discovery and Development Center at the University of Cape Town. He's involved at the cutting edge of advancing preclinical drug discovery projects, and he will also be speaking to us about some of his work. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, you're welcome to this session on collaborative biomedical innovations in Africa. I'd like to inform you of our hashtags, hashtag WHS Africa 2021, hashtag World Health Summit. And do please make use of the interactive sections in your Zoom box at the bottom of your screen. Use the Q&A functions in Zoom to provide your feedback and also ask any questions that you may have to us. I'm going to go right away into the session this morning, and I would like to introduce Dr. Alfred Mubangizi from the Ministry of Health in Uganda. He's, as I mentioned, the Assistant Commissioner for Health Services, Vector-Borne and NTDs, division of the Ministry of Health headquarters. and he's a national coordinator for the NTD programs. He coordinates all NTD implementing partners in Uganda, and he holds a master's in public health from Makerere, the famous MAC in Kampala, which he obtained in 2009. Also obtained his earlier degrees from Bara University of Science and Technology. He also has skills and training in planning and management from the Uganda Management Institute. He has attended several courses and really is experienced in the management of NTDs, particularly also in the WASH section. He has spearheaded the work in Uganda to date and has really been involved in moving the NTD roadmap 2030 from the perspective of the Ministry of Health in Uganda. And with this, I'd like to hand over the floor to Dr. Alfred Mubangizi. Thank you so much for being with us. We look forward to hearing from you, Dr. Alfred.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'm Dr. Alfred Mubangizi, as you have heard, Assistant Commissioner Vector-borne Tropical Diseases and National Coordinator for NTD. Dear distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Welcome to Uganda. On behalf of Minister of Health and on my own behalf, I'm pleased to have you join us in the heart of Africa, continent of Africa, the part of Africa, as we work towards the common goal of achieving good health for everyone and everywhere. I take the honor and the privilege to thank the organizers of this World Health Summit regional meeting in Africa to strengthen collaborative biomedical innovation in Africa to eliminate infectious disease for opportunities to participate in this important summit. Africa continues to suffer from neglected tropical diseases, also considered as a disease of poverty and inequity. They affect the poorest members of our society, causing disability and mortality and robbing the continent of human capital and billions of dollars in economic productivity. The World Health Organization currently classified 20 diseases as neglected tropical diseases. These are debilitating diseases that are a mixture of parasitic and bacterial diseases, are endemic in 49 countries in the continent and affect over 600 million individuals, representing 42% of global burden of NTD. The epidemiology of NTD on the continent varies greatly, with many countries affected by as many as 5 or more of these diseases at any given time. Uganda is in the same category, with the high burden of neglected tropical disease. These diseases mainly affect rural communities, which result in reduced productivity, hence affect the socio-economic development of this population. Control and elimination of NTD is part of Uganda National Minimum Health Care Package, as heightened in health strategic sector strategic and investment plan 3. Yet the vision of Minister of Health is to have healthy and productive population that contribute to the socio-economic growth and national development. Health is a key priority in Africa. Sustainable health security for the African population requires collaboration and application of existing knowledge and innovations, as well as generation through robust research and innovation of new contexts and specific knowledge, technologies, innovation, and expertise that can shape evidence-based policy making and inform health interventions leading to improved health delivery awareness. This is in line with the WHO stipulated guidelines on accelerating elimination of NTD through the implementation of innovative and intensified disease management, in addition to other interventions like preventive chemotherapy, vector ecology management, provision of clean water and sanitation, and the use of multi-sectorial approach. However, this can be achieved if the medicine produced by innovation in medical research are affordable and accessible to meet African priority needs. This will help in achieving the goal of World Health Organization NTD Roadmap 2020-2030 which include but not limited to end epidemic of NTD by 2030, as evidenced by 90% reduction in the number of people requiring intervention against NTD by 2030. The elimination of NTD by either interruption of transmission at national or regional level, or elimination as a public health problem. These include African human trypanosomiasis, Gambians, Coxsackiasis, Leishmaniasis, rabies, soil-transmitted helminths, schistosomiasis, trachoma, and lymphatic filariasis. Drugs for neglected tropical disease, drugs for neglected disease initiative, DNDI, is one of the signatories of London Declaration on NTD, which was signed in the 30th January 2020, where pharmaceutical companies, donors, endemic countries, and NGOs came together, signed a declaration on NTD. Together, they continue to control, eliminate, and eradicate at least 10 diseases by 2020 and improve the lives of our over 1 billion people. And I thank DNDI for keeping their promises. Uganda has been a pioneer of efforts to develop and then accelerate the introduction of new medicines for infectious diseases. Over the years, Uganda institutions working with partners from across the region, like Drugs for Neglected Tropic Initiative, and other international partners have been successful in innovation efforts to introduce new treatment for visceral leishmaniasis, sleeping sickness, and other NTDs. In 2018, our host Makerere University and Uganda National Health Research Organization entered into 5-year HAD RSCC consortium together with other neighbors, together with our neighbor, Malawi, and the Drug for Neglected Disease Initiative. This consortium is trialing new medicine developed for sleeping sickness address form of the disease, which proportionally affect Uganda and Malawi. The study will provide clinical data to assess the safety and efficacy of the treating both stages of sleeping sickness and indeed intended to contribute to WHO control and elimination efforts in East Africa by providing evidence for potential new and earlier administer oral drugs. Uganda is a member of Africa KADIA consortium, which brings together 10 research and academic partners with funding from European and developing countries, clinical trials partnership. The consortium is undertaking a large-scale phase 3 clinical trial to assess efficacy and safety of combination of methotrexate and paramycin in treating VL in East Africa. It is also looking at developing new diagnostic tools that are less invasive and less dangerous to VL patients, most of whom are children. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have learned in these remarkable experiences is that successful development and rollout of new tools requires partnership, collaborative, open speech, and end-to-end approach. The question of access and affordability needs to be asked at every beginning of the discovery efforts. Development of new medicine tools is like a relay race in which each runner must complete their leg, but also must make sure to pass on the baton. We in the government and those who support R&D efforts have responsibility to make sure that our policies do not obstruct the runners or make the race more difficult than necessary. We need to prioritize innovation for infectious disease in national plans, support open and collaborative R&D as well, and ensure there is sustainable financing. I wish a fruitful liberation during this workshop and continued success in delivering new tools that address priority health needs of those suffering from infectious diseases in Africa and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to declare this symposium officially open. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mubangizi, for those opening remarks. Much appreciated. It's exciting to see the work that is going on in Uganda and how that really reflects the biomedical innovation that is taking place across the continent, supported by many of the partners whom we hope to learn more about and from today. I think this is a unique opportunity in this session to really get a bird's eye view of the major activities that are happening across the continent and beyond in the area of both the funding and the research itself for infectious diseases, particularly neglected tropical diseases, be it drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics. Even those of us in the field sometimes have a tough time keeping up with all the new networks, organizations, entities, and activities. So really, this is a one-stop shop where we hope to really catch up on a lot of what is going on. And with that, I want to begin the first part of this session asking you, Dr. Wasuna, as the director of the Africa office of the DNDi, if you could tell us some of the current innovative platforms that are addressing NTDs in Africa, of which DNDi is a part, some of which DNDi is leading and is supporting. If you could just give us this, we'll say in French, a coup d'oeil of what is going on across the continent. Dr. Wasuna.
Thank you very much, John, for this introduction. I'll first of all start by telling you who we are. Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative is a collaborative, non-profit drug research and development organization that discovers, develops, and delivers treatments for neglected patients around the world. DNDi was created in 2003 by Medecins Sans Frontieres, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, together with 6 other public institutions, including our very own Kenya Medical Research Institute. This was in response to the frustration of clinicians and the really desperation of patients faced with medicines that were ineffective, unavailable, not safe, unaffordable, and had never really been developed at all. So as a way of introduction also on neglected tropical diseases, which for this session I'll call NTDs, Dr. Alfred has already, brilliantly described them, but I just want to say 2 things, that about 40% of the global NTD burden is in the African continent. And therefore, innovation is required because treatments that exist for these NTDs are really have a very low cure rate. They're not easy to use, as I've said before, and there are safety concerns. And NTD really causes millions to be trapped in endless poverty and lead to death. So when DNDi was created in 2003, a strategic decision was made to create disease-specific platforms to help in the innovation for treatments for visceral leishmaniasis that was occurring in Africa. So Leishmaniasis East Africa platform, which I'll call LEAP, abbreviated as LEAP, and the Human African Trypanosomiasis or Sleeping Sickness platform, which I'll call HART. These were created in 2003 and 2005, respectively. So there is also a filaria platform, but I'll not go into this. For this presentation, I'll just talk about the 2 platforms, that's LEAP and HART. So why did DNDi find it necessary to create the LEAP platform and then also join other partners to create the HART platform? So these 2 are very important regional disease-specific platforms, LEAP and HART, were created so that, we could define needs and contribute to the discussion on the target product profile. For those of you in clinical research, you know that, this TPP, the target product profile, it's a discussion that you have to have well in advance before you even put your drug into clinical trials. You want to know, for example, define the efficacy, the dose, the route of administration, and so on. But who is best able to do this is the wearer of the shoe. So that's why the platforms were very key. And also the platforms were key to strengthen local research capacities. which at the beginning was really fragmented. Some people having capacity and others really having challenges. Also, the platforms were really to carry out or to conduct clinical trials, both preclinical, clinical, and implementation studies. And it was projected in the future to help with facilitate with the registration of the innovation. So the LEAP platform, therefore, was, as I said, was created in 2003, and the countries that were involved were Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Sudan. And you've heard why they were created. And the LEAP platform had 6 clinical trial sites spread in those 4 countries. And their membership is about 60 members from 20 countries. So well before the LEAP creation of the LEAP platform, the treatment for leishmaniasis, which I'll call VL, visceral leishmaniasis, which I'll call for this presentation VL, was an antimonial compound called SSG. And it was the first line treatment given for 30 days. So even in terms of clinical trials, some countries had never done clinical trials before. So the R&D capacity was really fragmented. Diagnostic capacity was not there. Data management was really also poor for decades. And so there was no new treatment that had been registered. So then comes the LEAP platform created by DNDi to be able to innovate and to cut the long story short. I wish I'd had time, but we were able to innovate two new treatment options for VL patients in the region, using already existing drugs to make treatments shorter and safer and more effective. So we were able to deliver SSG, that's the antimonial compounds, and paromomycin, PM, I call it, for 17 days as a combination treatment for VL. And also we've been able to deliver as a platform plus other partners, liposomal amphotericin B, which is Ambisome, together with a miltefosine combination for the treatment of VL and HIV co-infection. So if we move to heart, is, on the other hand, was founded in 2005 in Kinshasa, DRC, with over 120 members in the platform from about 20 institutions. And just like the LEAP platform, the narrative was the same, was to innovate and to strengthen capacity and so on. So to cut a long story short, the heart platform also had two innovations that were delivered. The nifurtimox eflornithine combination therapy, that's NECT, which is also included in the WHO list of essential medicines for treatment of stage 2 African sleeping sickness. And in 2018, fexinidazole, which is an oral treatment, was also innovated and delivered, and is registered in the DRC for the treatment of the sleeping sickness. Other studies for specialized groups are currently ongoing with fexinidazole. So that briefly is about the two platforms and briefly what we're doing. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wasuna, for that. It's exciting to see what DNDi is doing. And with that, I'd like to move to you, Matthew. You are at H3D, you do cutting edge drug development. We've heard of some of the things that your institution is doing, but can you share with us some of the experience that you and your institution have in collaborative drug discovery in Africa, which I think is a really exciting field given the many infectious diseases for which we still need drugs, including drugs for the last mile and improvement of existing ones and so on. So just share with us some of what you're doing, Matthew.
Thank you, Dr. Mwasi, and thank you to the participants for attending this meeting. So I will start by mentioning that I'm attending the meeting on behalf of our director, Professor Kelly Chibale, and I'm glad to introduce to you the work that we're doing as the Drug Discovery and Development Center We are an integrated drug discovery platform founded in 2010 at the University of Cape Town. And what we mean by an integrated drug discovery platform is that we have the capacity that you'd find at a traditional innovative pharmaceutical industry to prosecute drug discovery projects. So that means we have capacity for medicinal chemistry to both make new molecules or modify existing molecules based on issues that are identified either through preclinical or clinical data. We have access to a biology platform, specifically in malaria, tuberculosis, and antimicrobial resistance that can look at the biology of the compounds or of the diseases that we're interested in, and identify issues for optimization, identify mechanisms of action for compounds we're interested in, and really allow us to integrate this information into drug discovery towards progressing compounds through the sometimes very difficult drug discovery cascade. And finally, at the end of the day, I'm sure a lot of us with maybe a slightly medical background will be aware that however good the compounds are, however efficacious they are, we also need them to circulate in the body for long enough for them to exert the desired effect. And so we also have a good drug metabolism and pharmacokinetics platform, which I had. And really, this platform allows us to look at how new drug molecules or existing ones in the clinic are broken down in the body, and to come up with solutions and use that information to see how we can optimize their duration of action, either at an early stage in preclinical models or later on through prediction techniques to see how we can optimize them for human dosing. And through this platform, we've been able to, with the support of different partners, progress compounds. I think our most advanced compound currently is in phase 2 clinical trials for malaria. And so this is really a good example of how we can build such platforms in Africa and really progress drug discovery to address African problems. The other side of this is, of course, that I think as both Dr. Alfred and Dr. Asuna have highlighted, that drug discovery by its very nature is a very complex field that requires a lot of collaborations to achieve anything at the end. We are all aware of the various costs that are associated with this process. And so at the end of the day, it's not just about what H3D is doing, it's also about what H3D and others are able to do to build collaborations and to build capacity across Africa, so that we're able to get to that critical mass of scientists and critical mass of centers that we need in order to address continent-wide problems. And so one of our quite unique programs we have in this area is the Grand Challenges Africa program. And really the program was founded in 2018 as a result of discussions with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Medicines for Malaria Ventures, and the African Academy of Sciences. And the idea behind it was to find and develop African scientists in order to expand and strengthen the drug discovery ecosystem in Africa. And the idea is that we identify scientists. We've done one call in 2018 and another one late last year. So we identify scientists and we provide these scientists access to our drug discovery platforms, and they essentially get to drive their programs completely at their home institutions. And we jointly work with them to identify challenges and see how we are able to progress those programs at their level while building their capacity, at local level. And so the first cohort of 8 researchers, I think, is just about to finish their work, and we hope quite soon to be able to identify the next cohort of 8 scientists that will be progressing through our program. And so together with this, of course, we are also involved. I think I see a few familiar names among the attendees. We are also involved in joint applications to funding bodies trying to promote African-led collaborations when we need to do applications, especially the big applications, for example, with the NIH and with the European Union. So I think that's just a small snippet of the type of work that we're involved in, and I hope that we can continue getting involved in as we continue expanding the drug discovery ecosystem in Africa. Thank you, John.
No, thanks, Matthew. I think what's very exciting is how your work really provides an opportunity for young African scientists from across the continent, not only South Africa, and particularly how you engage in joint applications with other bodies and entities. I think it's the true spirit of collaboration, which really is the spark for innovation. Thank you very much. And I'd like to turn to you, Dr. Buryanga from AU NEPAD. And as we know a lot of what AU NEPAD does, but we'd like to know specifically the support that you've been providing to bolster the African innovation ecosystem. You know, NEPAD is a major convener, and of course, in-house from within Africa, funding and support is so critical. We'd really like to know some of what you do so that some of the scientists listening can also appreciate and take advantage of the opportunities which you provide. Janet.
Thank you so much, John, and thanks for the participants that have made it to attend this session. I do hope that you get to learn a thing or two regarding how we intend to strengthen the ecosystem for health research and innovation in Africa. And particularly this discussion, I just want to mention that within the African Union's Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want, the AU has an aspiration for African people to have a high standard of living, quality of life, sound health and well-being, and an assured health security. So in 2016, the African Union member states, particularly the ministers of health, adopted what they call the Africa Health Strategy that runs from a period of 2016 to 2030, and that's in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And this strategy recognized the importance of investing in research and innovation for tackling health challenges on the continent. And the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, was mandated by the Specialized Technical Committee on Health, Population and Drug Control, which is the decision-making body on matters related with health, population and nutrition within the African Union, to collaborate with interested partners and facilitate the integration of health research and innovation within the Africa Health Strategy that was adopted at the time. In order to achieve this, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, had to conduct a situation analysis and review with the aim of reviewing what was happening on the continent in terms of health research and innovation ecosystem. And we did identify, through analyzing the data that we collected, we did identify gaps within the ecosystem. And I just want to mention the 7 key gaps that were identified with in the ecosystem. Number 1 was the limited sustainable financing mechanisms for health research and innovation in Africa. And number 2 was limited participation of private sector in most of the research projects in Africa. Gap number 3 was the fact that the scale up of products emerging from the research and innovation by African institutions was lacking. And we also noted that there was limited knowledge management and innovation dissemination systems to elevate the knowledge outputs of African research. Gap number 5 was the lack of adaptive and proportionate regulatory systems and intellectual property rights systems that need to support rather than stifle research and innovation. Gap number 6 was the limited South-South collaboration and coordination, and other colleagues have talked about collaborative health research and innovation amongst scientists. So we did notice that there was limited South-South collaboration and coordination between scientists and funding agencies. And then finally, gap number 7 was the fact that there was a poor African representation in international research and funding fora, where health innovation research agenda setting and decisions on resource allocations are made. So our technical advisory support, therefore, aims to address these key challenges, as I've mentioned, and we definitely know that we cannot do it alone. Simply, we try and contribute through what our mandate and comparative advantage as an AU body allows us to do. And so we deliver and package our solutions through member states and regional economic communities, and in partnership with the relevant stakeholders. Particularly, our solutions focus on agenda setting and priority setting, designing and reviewing and reforming institutions that are dealing with health research and innovation. And we do that via the policies and the regulation and legislation that we try to draft together with these member states and regional economic communities. The other part of our technical advisory solutions are packaged to mobilize resources. And as a broker, we leverage the partners' financial and technical support to implement both the national and regional health research and innovation strategies that they would have adopted. We do foster systematic collaboration and networking among relevant players within the innovation ecosystem to enable knowledge transfer. We also ensure that there is effectiveness and efficiency in the partnerships that we establish in order to support the various initiatives that are present on the continent. And how do we do this? We ensure that the partners that are working with us align their support to the set out regional priorities. And also we ensure that there is partner coordination through the various engagements that we have with the partners and the partners platforms that we have established. And then we make sure that there is definition of the collective impact and sharing of partners' roles and responsibility so that there is minimum duplication of effort. We do, like Mr. Chair, you've mentioned, convene different platforms, particularly those that involve policymakers and private sector and civil society and different other players, and ensure that they give their contribution to the ecosystem. And we are able to understand their comparative advantage, and we are able to also tap into their knowledge and best leverage on what they're able to deliver. So that is our mode of operation, and we do hope that definitely we are not a panacea to the solutions, the challenges related to health research and innovation. We believe that with everybody around this conference and other partners interested in Africa's health research and innovation, we will be able to achieve the desired goal for a robust health research and innovation ecosystem in Africa. Thank you again, Chair.
Well, thank you very much for that, Janet. Again, I'm very excited to see all that AU NEPAD is doing. I'll come back to you again to understand better how you try to help, especially around the regulatory issues. So I'll be coming back to you very soon on that. I'd like to go to you, Dr. Urabe, from the GIT Fund. Well, as we all know, GIT is not a bank per se, but they really a major funder of collaborative research in Africa particularly for infectious diseases and NTDs for that matter. We'd like to understand from you, Dr. Rabe, first of all, how you managed to pull together all this funding and the mechanisms through which you push that out to actors across the globe, particularly in Africa, to conduct the much needed research into drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics. Dr. Rabe.
Great, thank you, Chair. Let me share a screen just very quickly, sometimes the visuals help 1,000 words. So GHIT Fund, we are a fund, we have been around since 2013. It all started with our previous CEO when he was discussing with multiple stakeholders over a bowl of soba, or maybe in African context, it's maybe with ugali or posho, I guess, maybe that's the local term. But it started off with, if there's any way for us to work together with different stakeholders, the government, the foundations, and the pharmaceutical companies, to amass all the intellect together and funding together to invest in diseases, malaria, TB, and NTDs, and different interventions, therapeutics, diagnostics, vaccines, to do product development. When we say invest, but it's essentially grants that we give out, trying to move products from discovery stage all the way to registration. And we don't only work on discovery to registration, that's where we invest money but we do facilitate the access and delivery portion. As it was mentioned earlier, the end-to-end approach is also very important here. Discovery, if you only work on discovery without really considering the access and delivery piece, it's not really going to really help those people who are in need. And also there was another comment with regards to getting the TPP early. I think it was Dr. Wasuna's point, start well in advance, the R&D. We do that by looking at research and development. So we do require the developers to work on the TPP well in advance, to work towards the product. And as I said, we are a public and private partnership. So we do work with a public sector, namely the government of Japan and UNDP. We do have a lot of connection there in the public sector, and the private sector, which are mainly pharmaceutical companies, both Japanese and global, and then the rest 25% contributed by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Wellcome Trust. So it's an amalgamation of 3 different parties working together to help these product development. And in terms of how we operate and how we work together with African entities, just to give you a figure, we have invested so far 260 million as of June 2021, since our inception in 2013, half of which is in the NTD space. Around half of that is in NTD space. And you can see here, we have about 13 investments with the African partners. And these numbers, 5, 2, 14, 20, are all collaborations with the African entities. So we do work very closely. And these are only numbers for direct collaboration. So if you were to consider, let's say, clinical trial sites or some work beyond, let's say, UNDP's access and delivery partnership, it's much more. We do work very closely with Africa. And what I wanted to emphasize here is that, yes, all our programs require collaboration between Japan and overseas entities. And Japan, we're good at different technologies, but if you don't put them in a local context, you'll never get them the right way. So it would be really good for us to foster increasing collaboration, to work with those entities, institutions, research institutions, universities, etc., on the ground, to work with our technologists in Japan, and also work with technologists in Africa as well, who knows the real needs, and then work together to really make it into the product together, working collaboratively. So with that, thank you, Chair. I'll pass back to you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Rabe, for that. It is great to see the millions that have been so judiciously pushed out and have actually provided us with good results. Because of time, I'd like to go on again, this time back to you again, Dr. Buryanga. As I mentioned to you, the work you do is so critical, because you do also address issues of ethics and regulation and harmonization of these, the different regulations that exist across countries on the continent, sometimes become burdensome and a hindrance to research. Issues around IP, and we've all heard some of the horror stories around IP either being taken away without proper acknowledgement or becoming a hindrance or a blockade to being able to innovate, even though the tools exist. So can you tell us some of what you've been doing at AU-NEPA to support in this area?
Thank you again, Chair. So again, as our modus operandi demands, we employ a regional or continental approach in our efforts to support member states. And we have continued to engage the national regulatory authorities to ensure that they strengthen the regulatory systems for medical products. And through the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization initiatives, we have drafted and had the member states through their regional economic communities where they belong adopt harmonized guidelines. And these harmonized guidelines are used by the individual countries within the regional bloc. And the objective here is to ultimately have the countries be able to mutually recognize the various standards that have been adopted to regulate these medical products. We do establish platforms that enable transfer of knowledge. And I can mention the 11 regional centers of regulatory excellence that have been established that assist the regulators to pool capacity and to deploy training and capacity building across the various regulatory activities that are undertaken. Would have otherwise been difficult for an individual national regulatory authority to undertake. So these regional centers of excellence do help out in terms of pooling the capacity, pooling the knowledge, and then disseminating this knowledge on regulatory science to the regulators. Regarding ethics, we continue to urge the researchers to be responsible and conduct responsible research and encourage member states to enact legislation that's aligned with internationally agreed codes of ethics, especially those that definitely protect our people from abuse and the research that is being done. We ensure that it's aligned with the international regulations. Regarding the IP issue, we do continue to connect and encourage member states to approach our continental and regional institutions that have been established that have the capacity to train, have the capacity to provide resources in terms of improving the intellectual property system. And I can mention some of these regional hubs being the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization, ARIPO, and OWAPI for the countries, where they have the competences to support the member states. And so we continue to engage these organizations. We have developed some instruments together with regional economic communities that focus on specific areas of intellectual property, and they appreciate the fact that they're beginning now to register more and more intellectual property using their national offices, and we do believe that the more we engage and utilize and leverage the competencies of these regional offices for intellectual property, including the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, we will be able to strengthen the IP and begin to benefit from intellectual property going forward. And for now, I will stop there, and thank you again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Buryanga. Appreciate it. Dr. Rabe, just back to you again. You told us about the kind of funding that the GIT fund provides and the mechanisms through which you do this, but I also understand that you don't do this alone. You often collaborate with other funders to promote innovation. Can you help us understand how this works in a way that is able to really make the most out of potential synergies and contribute to measurable impact?
Thank you, Chair. So we call ourselves GHIT. It's very hard to see it from GHIT, but that's how we call it. And thank you very much. Sorry for not being clear. But from GHIT, we consider medicines are valueless without access. So I think for us, the continuum, because from the R&D all the way up to access and delivery, we have to consider both as end-to-end approach, as I mentioned earlier. And on the R&D side, as we mentioned earlier, we do fund research partnerships that are specifically created to deliver specific work, or maybe more established, work with more established PDPs, like of course DNDi or TB Alliance or MMV, etc. But for, as I said, for specific work, like for the case we have with a pediatric formulation work for schistosomiasis. That one we work with places like KEMRI or University of Poitiers from Ivory Coast, etc. So for R&D side, we do have these different partnerships where we can actually get different funding from different sources. And as for programs that are closer to the market, we actually do require grantees to find co-funders so that we can work together with other funders, because we are a relatively small fund by ourselves, but we would like to be a catalytic funder to actually pull different funding, let's say from other foundations, like Gates Foundations, or for instance, for the schistosomiasis program, we did have a program co-funded by something like EDCTP. And also for the programs that are closer to the market, we do have what we call a top-down approach, where we do look at the landscape of funders, and we try to bring all the innovators and funders and access stakeholders together under this platform called Uniting Efforts for Innovation, Access and Delivery, which we started in collaboration with UNDP and the government of Japan in 2019. So that's a top-down approach. And of course, the bottom-up approach is more to do with working directly with the groups that are the grantees and trying to find out ways to connect and accelerate the program development by either us getting into different conversations to stimulate and facilitate the conversation going forward, and or basically connecting them with the right stakeholders. So I think it is the importance of coordination with other funders is incredibly important, and we always tell our grantees to try to use us to try to connect with different stakeholders so that we could be a catalytic funder in order to bring in more funding in order to accelerate the program to help reach the patients very quickly. So yes, those are the points that we're trying to work with, but basically getting the funding stakeholders all come together on one table and then work together to find solutions together. Thank you, Chair.
I think it's critical knowing that there is not additive, but synergy or synergistic power when major funders like GHIT and others come together, and we do see the results. We're hoping to see more of this and really take full advantage of these synergies. Dr. Wasuna, I'd like to come to you based on some of the information that funders and conveners like GHIT as a funder and AU NEPAD as a convener have given us. What are some of the outputs, the real stuff, the successes that we have had based on some of the support that DNDi has been able to receive or also has been able to provide to others. But of course, not only the successes, but some of the challenges that have been faced along that pathway. Perhaps you could use the LEAP and the HAT platforms as classic examples of these.
Thank you very much, John. So as I'm using the LEAP and the HAT platform to really talk about the successes and the challenges of the workings of the disease-specific platforms in Africa. So actually, you're asking me to take you through the journey, the 16-year journey of the platforms. And that is really a lot. And we really have had a lot of success in the two platforms. But I just want to mention that we were able to achieve so much. Although we started of inequity, where we were lacking capacity, where the infrastructure for research was fragmented, where there was no funding, and where there are no treatments. So we wanted to innovate, but we were limited. So that's where we started, and now where we are now. So for the platforms to have achieved so much, to the extent of innovating at least 2 treatments each for the conditions, I think that was really commendable. And we could do that because of the partnerships that we developed. And right from the beginning, we involved our governments, we involved ministries of health, we worked with the national disease control programs, we worked with the regulatory authorities. Then, there was regulatory authorities, there wasn't so much expertise in other countries where we're working, but at least now that has improved. But then, so we worked with the World Health Organization, with research institutions, academia, with MSF, civil society, clinicians, everyone, and the communities. So that alone was an achievement of getting all those people together, the platforms, to innovate. Because when you're innovating, you need everyone. And so we were able to consolidate and strengthen existing research and development capacities, and also started even to get involved in access to treatments, because it's not useful to innovate and the patients don't get the treatment. What are we doing? So we are also starting to involve ourselves in access. So this was a forum also to be able to promote scientific exchange and sharing of knowledge. So in fact, we brought scientists from, say, for example, within the LEAP platform, scientists from Sudan who were well versed with clinical trials, came all the way to Amudat and took the doctors there and the researchers through what it means to do a clinical trial, what must you do, and training. And when you mentor the young scientists, that was really a very good plus for the platforms, because you looked up to a professor who taught you, firsthand. And when you go to read the books, you find that it's an author of some of those books. So this was really a very powerful way of capacity building. And so we were also able to foster South-South collaboration, different countries collaborating, and that was really a very good example of success in the platforms. And we were therefore able to strengthen research capacities in countries. And we were able to ensure that clinical trials were led and driven by African scientists in the endemic countries. So this also gave oomph to the younger scientists. I want to be like Monique, I want to be like Dr. John, I want to be. So that really was a success. But and we did a lot of training as well. We trained a lot of young scientists in terms of specific clinical trials specific trainings, but also a master's and a PhDs, and there are lots of trainings that were done. But going back to innovation, and I think this is really a pride. I'm proud of the innovations that were made in the platforms. So I said before, for the LEAP platform, we're able to innovate. we were able to combine the two treatments, the SSG and promomycin. I defined to you what they were for the treatment of VL in Eastern Africa. And a big trial of over 1,000 patients in the 4 countries, 6 sites, and some sites never done clinical trials before. And you know, when you're doing a clinical trial, these are highly regulated studies, both nationally and internationally. So everybody must be on their toes. So we were able to really carry out meticulous research and delivered the combination treatment for 17 days. And compared to the SSG alone for 30 days, which was the only treatment then for VL in the region. And WHO looked at the data and they were able to recommend our innovation as first-line treatment for VL in the Eastern Africa. So that was really a big success for us. And this has been adopted into a policy change has been made, the revision of guidelines for VL treatment in those countries have been done, and this treatment has been adopted. And also it's in the essential medicine list for this country. So that's a big plus. And I also had mentioned the HIV VL combination, co-infection, which we also have innovated together with the partners in everything we do in DNDi. So even if I don't say partners, just know that there are partners in there. We never ever work alone. So we innovated with partners, and there are many, and I can't list all of them. And we're able to deliver treatment that is ambisome, liposome, amphotericin B, and miltefosine, which is an oral compound for the treatment of VL. And for the heart platform, it's the same thing. That's capacity building and training and infrastructure upgrade. All those apply also to the heart platform. So I'll not repeat them, but we were able to innovate. In the NECT, as I said before, and in the fexinidazole. Fexinidazole is a new chemical entity, a new drug altogether. We started from scratch, and we were able to treat patients with sleeping sickness and able to show that a 10-day treatment was enough to cure them. And what a game changer, because the cases just had a significant drop. And now the sleeping sickness is the last mile. And even then we are innovating. We are trying to find a magic bullet, one drug that will, completely cure the sleeping sickness. So that's where we are, and the studies are still ongoing, using fexinidazole in specialized groups, but those are the innovations. So maybe briefly, John, just 2 minutes, I talk about the challenges. Challenges were many, especially where we started from. We started from far in some of the countries. And because the research infrastructure was poor, and nobody had done some clinical trials, even the infrastructure, just even in the settings, we were started in some countries, we started the studies in the tents, and then DNDi, with the help of the donors, was able to put up some treatment centers for these patients. And so we started far. So those were the problems. We had different regulatory and systems in place. And I'm glad that my sister Janet is talking about regulatory harmonization. That's really the dream of any researcher. When we have ethics and regulatory harmonization, that's the dream, because you cut your time even more than half waiting for approvals. So this was really a problem. And cultural environments, we have to be sensitive to other people's cultures and respect them. We are working from different countries, so that's where problems. And we work in the middle of nowhere, so we also had staff limitations, people leaving, high staff turnover in some of the areas and countries. So those are the problems. And of course, the climate and the terrain did not did not stay out of our path. We work in the middle of nowhere, and so the climate, when it rains, the roads are, washed away, and you're just lucky when you go from point A to point B, because you could just go down the cliff. And so sometimes this made recruitment of patients very slow. So those are the challenges. And thank you very much, John. I've skimmed through, but could be more. Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Wasuna. I can tell there's a lot more that you'd have loved to share with us. And I mean, how easy is it to box in perhaps over a decade of work into just a couple of minutes, but much appreciated. I want to move on to you, Dr. Njoroge. If you can also speak to some of these challenges, but this time specifically in the drug discovery. So Dr. Wasuna has walked us through a classic example via the HAT and the LEAP platforms of how when we have these new innovative drugs or combinations, we can really test them. But you are in the space where you're actually trying to find these new molecules, looking for new targets and hits. You're doing your high throughput screening and isolating compounds and this kind of thing. Can you tell us some of these challenges that you face at your end, or your view of these challenges across the continent of Africa? Matthew?
Sure. Thanks again, Dr. Mwasi. And I think the other panelists have already done quite a good job at starting to introduce some of the issues that we also face. I think as both Dr. Janet and Dr. Wasuna have highlighted, regulatory harmonization, I think, continues to be a challenge that all of us face from time to time. And I'm quite happy to hear that there is a lot happening there. But maybe to think more about the practical day-to-day life of a research laboratory, one of the very big things that we face as a challenge is in the recruiting and retaining of drug discovery scientists in Africa. I think there are some estimates that say that close to about, if not more, of our skilled professionals, that is Africa's skilled professionals, are not working on the continent. And there are many different reasons for this. There are no simple answers or simple solutions, but what it means is that however good our programs are or however innovative we want to be, there is a bit of a limit, because we have to either convince people to come back, or else we have to make a decision, a conscious decision, to recruit the best talent wherever we can find it. And that's quite a big challenge, and of course has a lot of implications in being able to address and meet medical needs in Africa. Because at the end of the day, I think as all of us will acknowledge, the best way to do this will be to find skilled African professionals to work on addressing these challenges. Of course, the question of brain drain, if we could summarize it that way, has, as we've said, multiple causes and noisy solutions. But I think one of the biggest contributors to this is the problem of infrastructure. And of course, when we think about infrastructure, sometimes we restrict ourselves to thinking about the buildings and the equipment. And all that is good. And I think Africa has started making quite big advances in this. I think I can think of a number of research labs in Africa that would be able to compete at the cutting edge of world-class research in terms of the biomedical research that they're able to do. I can think specifically in areas of genetics, for example, or cell biology, where I think we've made quite big strides in the last decade. But the other side of infrastructure is thinking also about the ecosystem of drug discovery, which is specifically, for example, when we think about how long it takes us to order in chemicals, or the regulatory challenges that we might find. I think we've had challenges, for example, with our colleagues as we try to build collaborations across Africa, and we find that if they need to order a simple chemical, that they are not able to do that because the regulatory regime is such that they need multiple permits to order something that for someone in another lab in Europe would just be a click of a button and receiving it. But even for us in South Africa, who are lucky perhaps to have a slightly more permissive regulatory regime that allows us to get in a lot of the consumables that we need for research, there is also the question of the turnaround times. And all of us, I think, will appreciate that cutting edge science requires cutting edge results. You need to be able to think of the hypothesis you want to test, and when the ideas are still fresh, be able to prosecute them to their logical end. And I think for a lot of us in Africa, that is not always a possibility I'm waiting, for example, for chemicals that I ordered around 2 months ago, and they're still somewhere lost in shipping or stuck in customs or something else. And what that means is that even when we have very good ideas and very good projects, there are delays. There are delays that are intrinsic to that maybe we're not able to overcome. And here again, there are no easy solutions, but it's something that will require essentially a critical mass of research centers, because if you think about this from the other point of view, which is from the commercial providers' point of view, it doesn't make sense for them, for example, to have warehouses in Africa full of a certain chemical if only one lab in Africa is going to be ordering that. However, if there are more of us engaged in research, more of us prosecuting drug discovery types of research and other things, then it becomes more commercially feasible for them to be able to stock some of these things and be able to reduce the turnaround times that we experience. There are, of course, quite a number of other challenges that we could point to, but one of the others that I'd like to point to, just because it's something maybe that won't be covered by any of the other panelists, is that we also have an innate challenge in Africa, and this is the genetic diversity of our population. And from a drug discovery perspective, this becomes very important. I think by some estimates, I think we are amongst the most diverse populations in the world. And as we might know, the genetic diversity will have influences on how we respond to drugs, and it will also have an impact on how those drugs are processed in the body and how long they stay in the body. I think there are already some good summaries in literature, especially in the area of TB and HIV, where there are a number of drugs that whose toxicity is slightly higher in the African population just because of the diversity of our drug metabolizing enzymes, which means that for certain drugs, the same doses that have been optimized in other populations will lead to much higher levels of the drug in the African population, which will mean that there is greater propensity for toxicity and all that. And of course, the same is true at disease biology level, that a number of the receptors, if I think, for example, of some of the things involved in cancer treatment or involved in hypertension treatment, but a number of those receptors are quite specific to the specific genetic diversity that we have, and that means that some of the treatments that are optimized elsewhere may not always work for us. And really here, I think the solution, and I think there are quite a number of people already thinking about this, is finding ways to build in more clinical trials in Africa so that we are able to test these treatments within our populations and then find the right drugs and the right doses to address our diseases. There are, of course, many other things I think that we could point to, but I think that's a good summary of the main challenges that we have to think about. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Matthew. I think one thing that struck me, which you mentioned, which I also experienced, is just the challenge in ordering, key components, implements, even reagents that are needed for some of our work, and even sometimes the quality of these reagents and some of these things. It's quite problematic, and I can really identify with that. So we're hoping that a lot of these can be addressed as we try to ramp up infrastructure across the continent. But I'd like to move on, and I'm very conscious of time. I want to encourage you all, please, if you have questions or contributions, please make use of the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I encourage you to start fielding your questions so that we can line them up and address them. We'll have to eat a bit into the Q&A time, but I'd like to go back to you, Dr. Urabe, to ask you very specifically with GHIT, how you think you can promote African-led innovation and initiatives, specifically around NTDs. You have told us about the broad work that you do, but what specifically can GHIT do or is planning to do with regard to NTDs and innovation in Africa? Just very briefly in the next maybe 3 or so minutes, if you would. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try to make it into two so that we have more time. So in terms of Jihid's contribution, as I said, I guess we're here to make to form innovative partnerships. So if it's collaboration between Japan and Africa, I think that's something that we could definitely foster. We would like to also promote need-based research, considering the TPP and having this end-to-end considerations from the beginning. And that's something that's only possible in collaboration with the local context. The African-led innovation has to work with let's see, the Japanese technology providers who may need a little bit more guidance from their technology standpoint to fit into the local context. So working in the need-based approach from Africa, and that's one way that for us to form the partnership. And also in terms of, in addition to forming technological partnership, I think what we can contribute is more to do with catalytic funding, as we said, as we are connected from different types of funders, different types of pharmaceutical and different types of international organizations, trying to use us to leverage more funding to be channeled into these efforts so that the African-led innovations would be sufficiently funded to progress on their researches that are taking place. And also just last point, I think with regards to the local sense, if there are ways for technology providers in Japan to access some of the samples from the local, and that could be something that really could accelerate the programs going forward, because it's sample access is very difficult from perspective from the technology providers in Japan. So combination of technology and funding, and maybe on the side note, the sample access. I think those are something that we could work together with.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Rabi. As you can tell, I mean, this is a very direct question at you, because we're always interested in, specifically what Jihid will be able to do to ramp up. And I know Jihid has very good plans for promoting African-led innovation, and we're really looking forward to some of these. Dr. Njoroge, I want to come back to you again regarding how you see the future of drug discovery in Africa. There's still many neglected tropical diseases, infectious diseases to be addressed across the continent. There's now COVID, and still several other issues which require drug discovery. Even if you want to move away from infectious disease into non-communicable diseases, so many issues, but the landscape is still very nascent. How do you see the future? And what are some of the structures, systems, or actions that have been put in place to help African researchers and institutions to lead this work? As Dr. Wosuna rightly mentioned, that really it is important that those who are facing the problem are involved and at the forefront, actually, of finding the solutions. Dr. Njoroge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mwasi. And I'll start by just reflecting on the fact that we are able to have a panel on African biomedical innovation at the World Health Symposium and attract people such as Dr. Wasuna and Dr. Janet and myself from H3D means that we already have quite a lot of this, quite a lot of the big African-led efforts that are already happening right now on the ground. And that's a big step that maybe 10 years ago would not have been possible to envision. And so in a way, one might almost say that the future is here. That is, we already have quite a number of these organizations and universities and other private sector-led efforts that are already trying to address issues in drug discovery and biomedical innovation. And I think in reflecting about the future, I would say that we have quite a bright future in drug discovery in Africa. Sometimes the fact that we are just starting off on the journey could be a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage because it shows the capacity that we have for growth in this area, and really the number of opportunities that are just waiting for the right person or the right project or the right resources in order that we're able to prosecute them successfully. And then in thinking about how we meet this challenge of the future and make sure that we continue leading biomedical innovation, I think one of the things we need to think about is how to foster better collaboration between African institutions. I think there is a lot of room, and maybe this also needs a lot of reflection on whether we want to have efforts in parallel or where it's better and helps us to build a bigger critical mass by combining some efforts. And so it's something that requires reflection, especially because a lot of times when there are opportunities with not for North-South collaboration, for example, it makes more sense to have an African-led collaboration, for example, competing for this and able to offer solutions right from the biomedical level of, say, cellular biology and going all the way into clinical trials and marketing and all that. And I think if we are able to build these collaborations and find the proper projects to compete for them, I think we are potentially able to move drug discovery quite a bit. The issue of regulatory harmonization, I think, has already come up. And from a drug discovery scientist perspective, I think the main thing to think about is, I think, as the other panelists have brought up, the fact that we want to be able to, once we come up with these innovations, to develop them under similar regulatory frameworks, because again, that is could be one of the potential bottlenecks in the process. And then right at the beginning, Dr. Janet mentioned the limited involvement of the private sector in Africa in contributing to research. And this is partly on the private sector side, perhaps partly on the government side and partly on society side, but we all need to find ways of being more engaged in supporting research that addresses unmet medical needs. And I think if all of us, if we think about, for example, the innovation industries in the global north, I think there are quite a number of examples of the private sector being actively involved in solving issues that affect those populations. And I think we need private sector to start contributing to that as well. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, Matthew. I'm cognizant of time. I was actually enjoying it so much that I almost lost track. Veronica Mwamba, I see you have your hand up. Unfortunately, we cannot allow you to speak. Well, not that we cannot allow you, but the system doesn't allow you to make oral contributions. So kindly type whatever you have in the Q&A. I would like to crave your indulgence for just some 7 to 10 minutes more while we wrap up. So do type your questions. I do see there's one in there already. But Dr. Janet, if you could quickly tell us just something more specific about the African Medicines Agency, AMA. I know you mentioned this quickly. It's so critical in supporting the development of innovative drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics in Africa. And can you let us know what the latest on the status of the AMA treaty is, just really quickly, and then I'll move to pick the question, and I'll have Dr. Wasuna to wrap up for us.
Thank you so much, Chair and fellow colleagues. So the treaty that establishes the African Medicines Agency was adopted in February 2019 by the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the African Union. So the Assembly called on the African Union member states to sign and ratify the treaty in order for the treaty to enter into force as soon as possible. The African Medicines Agency will be the second continental health agency after the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that will enhance the capacity of state parties and regional economic communities to regulate medical products on the continent. The African Medicines Agency will also promote the adoption and harmonization of medical products regulatory policies and standards, as well as provide scientific guidelines and coordinate existing regulatory harmonization efforts of the African Union. By June 11th, 2021, 12 member states, Benin, Burundi, Cameroon, Chad, Republic of Congo, Gabon, Madagascar, Niger, Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, Senegal, Tunisia, and Zimbabwe had signed the treaty. 3 countries only have signed and submitted their instruments of ratification, and these are Algeria, Morocco, and Sierra Leone. No, those ones are yet to submit the instruments of ratification, but 7 countries have signed and submitted their instruments of ratification to the Commission, and these are Burkina Faso, Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Namibia, Rwanda, and Seychelles. Through the recently appointed African Union Special Envoy on AMA, Mr. Michel Sidibe, advocacy activities continue to be undertaken, and we do hope that many more countries will conclude their ratification process sooner. And if implemented effectively and efficiently, we hope that the African Medicine Agency will play an important role, not only in the regulation of generic medicines, but will contribute to enhancing the capacity and capability of the regulation of new and more complex molecules, including new health technologies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Janet. As I said, I'm cognizant of the time, but I just want to pick the 2 questions I see. They addressed, the first one is addressed, well, I'll just ask in general. I think whoever can pick it up, maybe to you, Janet, and then second one will go to Dr. Wasuna, and then she will wrap up. It's about IP rights, and research suggests that there's little knowledge among innovators to patent their products. What are some of the deliberate plans to enhance awareness among innovators in Africa, especially the younger researchers regarding IP? As I said before, I heard some of the horror stories around IP in Africa. So perhaps, Janet, I think this is best suited to you. Maybe Matthew, you could place just maybe a 30-second comment on that, and then I'll turn to you, Dr. Wasuna, for the second question we have, as well as your concluding remarks.
Thank you so much. To answer this question, I would like to refer, if the person who is asking this question is coming from a country that has a national IP office. Most countries in Africa do have these offices. I would like to recommend that they approach these offices for further guidance, but we also have tried as much as possible for the African English-speaking countries to engage at the regional level with the ARIPO, which is based in Zimbabwe. So there is a lot of capacity there, and if you do engage the Africa Regional Intellectual Property Organization there, they would give you a lot of information and on how best to patent or to register whatever IP product you have and to benefit from that. And then for the French-speaking countries, OAPI is another organization that is available to support the African countries on issues related with IP. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Janet. Matthew, do you want to quickly do 30 seconds on that from your experience?
And really just to reiterate what Dr. Janet has mentioned, but also to mention that I think in a number of our countries, there's increasingly institutional IP bodies that help to coordinate between institutions and government bodies. And so if someone is based in a university, for example, there might be an intellectual property office that helps to coordinate some of these activities between the institution and the national bodies. And so that is perhaps another avenue to learn more about IP protection and institutional perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Much appreciated. And to you, Dr. Wasuna, what procedures do you put in place in order to ensure that the data and other research materials generated are available to other researchers, especially the younger ones starting their career? Of course, we know the usual publications and reports and so on, but are there other avenues through which upcoming NTD researchers are able to learn of some of the things that DNDi and others are doing in infectious diseases research, particularly NTDs? And if you could also take the opportunity to tell us a bit of how or what can be done for African networks and African countries to play an even more responsible role in innovation at the global level?
Thank you, John. So if you allow me, I will start with, the last question first. As I mentioned earlier, 40% of the NTD burden is borne by Africa. So we in Africa, we need to style up, and our leaders specifically really need to style up, and they need to prioritize innovation, and also need to have in their national systems, implementation plans and national development plans in place for NTDs. And I know they're working hard, they've done so much already, but it's like a child, when you're giving something, you need more. So we need more from African leaders. We really need more so that we can have development of new tools, like diagnostic tools and treatments for NTD. As I repeat it again, we need better tools for testing and treatment. And we will need, for example, if you take diagnostic, we need a rapid diagnostic test. You just take your sample, you see the color, it's positive, it's negative, done, bingo. So that's the sort of thing that we need, simple, that can be done in places where we work, which is really in the middle of nowhere, where people are suffering in silence. So we need our leaders to support this. And we also call on donors to be able to, put money in efforts like this, where, Africans are coming together, working together, and, prioritizing the needs of the people. But, we lack funding because there are competing interests from our governments. Understandably, they have so many other things to take care of. So if our friends will be able to come forward and support this, I think that we'll be able to achieve the NTD, WHO NTD roadmap 2030. So we also need really to ask our government to foster an enabling environment for joint initiatives that strengthen capacity to be able to innovate, and being able to engage communities in affected areas of NTDs. These are usually conflict zones. I mean, if there's conflict, how can that be an enabling environment? So really, this call to action to our governments to be able to provide that environment for the community, so that communities can also participate in innovation. Also, I think sustainability of the R&D innovation is key, and also access. As I mentioned before, we can't innovate and then people have no access. So this is also a call to action, that can our governments put money into sustainability of our innovation, and can our friends help us? So I think that if we cannot protect the past decades gains against NTD, we will not be able to reach the WHO NTD roadmap of 2030. And so we need everyone. We need public leadership. We need cooperation, partnerships. We need everybody to be determined, to be passionate. And we need mentorship. Young people, where are you? We need everyone. So we need everyone to come together for us to succeed. So this is call to action to our governments, to AU. Janet, you're here. This is what we are saying on the ground. We need to work together. We have seen in the COVID pandemic, I mean, how Africa has galvanized, have come together, and there's direction, there's leadership. Why can't we do this for NTDs? If we do not, we will suffer the consequence, because NTDs will be put aside. So I'm calling all of you to action. So then, thank you for that, John, because really together we shall go very, very, very far. Answering the question asked about, let me just get the question again. it was what procedures do you have in place to ensure that data and other research material generated are available? So, okay, when one does research, you know, you either publish or perish. So usually what we, as an institution, as DNDi, we've made a concert, it's a policy that all our work is in open source journals. They are free, you don't have to pay anything. So all our work you can reach, and you know, you can find it on our website, you can, but we have also gone a step ahead and involved ourselves with data sharing platforms that are existing now. And we're particularly involved with the IDO, which is the Infectious Disease Observatory, Infectious Disease Data Observatory platform, which is you know, headed by Oxford University. And we have provided our data for leishmaniasis, all the clinical trials, so many of them, 11, I mean, we have reached 11, but maybe we do not provided them all of that because we are still analyzing some of the data. But yeah, so we give them the data and, you know, the ways whereby students can go in there and you know, use that data to even, you know, generate more research. So the idea is to just share data and publish where everybody can see your data. And all the clinical trials are registered with the Clinical Trials Observatory. So you can also get exactly to read how the trial was done and what kind of data was collected. So I hope I've answered the question, but the idea is then to publish in open source and have data sharing platforms, which we are participating. Our data center within DNDi also grew from, I didn't mention it, but grew from within the LIP platform, was created by DNDi, started you know, data management and statistics, and now they're participating in this data sharing platform, and we have now even gone high tech and have electronic data capture, and we are doing very well. So we offer these services, we can get in touch with us.
Well, thank you very much for that, Dr. Wasuna, much appreciated. Unfortunately, all good things come to an end, and we are really past the time. We really want to appreciate you, the participants, for staying with us, even though we've exceeded our time. We had a few technical challenges in the beginning, and so we started late. So invariably, we sort of tried to recover the time that we lost. I can see there's one more question, but because of time, I'd like to ask Lynette, if you're on the line, if you can just provide your email in the chat, in the Q&A section. You can respond to that with your email so that we can provide the response to that question on cutaneous leishmaniasis directly to the one asking. That would be great, please. So if you see the email address, do just send your question to that email and you will receive a response on some updates with cutaneous leishmaniasis. I really want to thank again you, Dr. Urabe from GHIT, all the way in Japan, Dr. Buryanga, all the way from in South Africa with the AU NEPAD, to Dr. Njoroge in South Africa as well with drug discovery and development, and also to you, Dr. Wasuna, who's leading the Africa office of the DNDi and the stellar work that you've done over the past close to 2 decades. I want to thank so much Dr. Alfred Mubangizi, Assistant Commissioner for Vector Control Division, MOH, in Uganda for coming on, and ultimately to you, the participants. As you can see, the drug discovery innovation or biomedical research innovation